I'm a libertarian.
What's that?
It's someone who believes in economic freedom to provide for one's life and social freedom to choose the life that one wants to live.
A libertarian believes that property and labor are extensions of your body. Because I own my body, I own my labor, and I own my property, and no one can take that away from me without my consent.
Tonight on Stossel, hundreds of students who are here because they care about liberty.
I believe no to legal plunder.
When people try to control other people, really bad things happen.
It's a joy to meet young people who care about freedom and limited government.
They care about it at an age when I didn't even think about that. I was a foolish liberal. What do they know that I didn't? So that's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
We're at George Washington University, where they're having a conference they call the Students for Liberty. I'm puzzled by what the heck that means, because I sure never thought about it when I was your age. And when I went to college, I was brainwashed into being a liberal. I went to Princeton in 1969, where they taught me that there were problems in the world, and now we had figured out that the answers were in government, because you could get the smartest people in one room and they could figure out a solution. And all they had to do was take money from rich people and share it with the poor, and we'd fix poverty. And that's just what all my professors said and what we all believed. And I'm curious how you, at your young age, figured out far quicker than I did how that doesn't work. But let me start by just telling my story. Coming out of that liberal college, I went to work on television by accident and was working in a newsroom. Never thought I'd stay there. And I took this job in television, and I became a consumer reporter. So I covered what other reporters weren't doing, and that was business and psychology, medicine and consumerism. And also it fit my bias. I saw that business was out there ripping people off. And I understood that capitalism was okay. It brought us some stuff. But I had been taught that it was cruel and unfair. This is why government has to intervene. Anacin was advertising Anacin is a tension reliever. All it is aspirin plus caffeine. People were getting injured on the job. We got to have OSHA protect the workers. Companies were selling lose weight while you sleep pills. Got to punish those people. Got to get government on the case. I'd read Upton Sinclair in college, The Jungle. Meatpacking was disgusting. We're all going to be poisoned except for those government inspectors being there. It all just made sense to me for a while. But then I started to see things that didn't add up. Yes, we have an OSHA to protect the workers, and workplace injuries have dropped steadily since OSHA was created. But then a researcher looked at workplace injuries from before OSHA, and surprise, it turned out the slope of the line was the same. Things were getting better before government. Government was like someone who jumps in front of a parade and pretends to be leading the parade. But in truth, things get better when people are free. As they get richer, they care more about safety. And companies don't want to hurt their workers, if only because they'd have to pay more to retrain them. I saw that food wasn't safe because of government regulation. I went to a chicken plant, and I saw the union government inspectors doing their job at the chicken plant. There they were, watching each bird as it went across the assembly line. And this was just while our cameras were on. They might have been sleeping when we weren't there, but they were looking for bacteria with their eyes. And now and then there was a particularly slimy bird going by, and they would pull it off the line. But in an age of microbiology, they were still looking with their eyes, because that's how they did it years ago, and government doesn't change. That wasn't making us safer. I soon realized that what made us safer is that the food company didn't want to get a bad reputation. In an open society, publicity protects us. It's because the free market works. It's because the way to get really rich in a free society is to serve your customers well. It's how Bill Gates got rich. He brought us something we didn't have before. And that there are scams, but the market is far better at policing it than clumsy government. If you rip somebody off, somebody nearby will offer that same service without ripping people off, and they'll get all your customers. That takes care of it better than government. But nobody in my business seemed to understand that. So then I started trying to read about it. I don't know how you learned about liberty, and I looked at the New York Times and the lefty press that we were reading, and it was all about, got to have much more government doing everything. And then I turned to the conservative press, and the conservative press was all upset about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and upset about homosexuality, and it just didn't make sense to me. I finally discovered Reason magazine. Some of you know about it. And that was an epiphany for me. It was like, wow, these people get it. Wow, they really get it much better than I do. And suddenly I saw I wasn't alone. There were other people who get this. And I congratulate you on getting it. Someone who got it before I did and understands it much better than I do is David Bose of the Cato Institute, the Washington think tank that focuses on liberty. I'd like you to add to this. What brought you around?
Thanks, John. And thanks all of you. John talks about coming from the left, having been a left liberal and come to see that government regulation, government spending weren't doing the things that he had hoped they would, that he had thought they did. I came from the right. I was sort of a constitutional conservative when I was growing up. I don't know exactly how that happened. Family influence, I guess. So I was always skeptical of that kind of big government, of overspending and exceeding the Constitution. But when I started reading conservative magazines and books, I started to discover that conservatives talked a lot about freedom, but when the rubber met the road, they were in favor of a lot of kinds of government regulation and intrusion in people's personal lives too. So I came to realize that I wasn't a conservative, but I knew I wasn't a big government liberal, and I figured out then that I was a libertarian, and I started reading things like Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek and Reason magazine, and I got involved in all of this, and I'm so glad I did, because freedom is the most important political value we have. And one of the reasons is that it underlies all the other great things that we want in our lives. Freedom makes possible economic growth. It makes possible a better environment. It makes possible people living together in peace, because they're not going around trying to tell each other how to live. They're not saying you have to pray my way or go to school my way, smoke my way, drink my way, all those kinds of things. We say leave it to the private sector, leave it to individuals. Freedom allows people to craft their own lives, to make their own decisions, to shape the kind of life they want. And so it's good to have the libertarian idea represented on campus. And this is just amazing. I've never seen a student libertarian gathering this big. This is tremendous. I'm just delighted to be here. Thanks for everything you do.
So come to the microphone. A few of you, tell us how did these ideas come to you? And you founded this group, I understand.
Thank you. My name is Alexander McCobin, and I was lucky. In 9th grade, my father gave me a copy of Atlas Shrugged for my birthday, and after I finished the last page, I said, this is what I've always thought. But for my first 2 years at college, I didn't meet a single other libertarian. I thought I was the only person crazy enough to believe this, and so nearly became a socialist just out of isolation. But I went to an Institute for Humane Studies seminar and started a libertarian group on my campus and realized there were lots of other people at my school who believed in these ideas. They just didn't have a place to get together and support one another. And 3 years later, we're here with over 500 students at the 4th Annual International SFL Conference, over 400 student groups in our network all over the world, and impacting thousands of students every year.
All right. And on that note, we want to hear from more of you. So when we come back, we will talk to you. And the next subject we want to talk about is keeping us safe, fighting wars. Should we be in all these countries where we are? There are plenty of crazy people who want to kill us. Maybe all of it's necessary. Many libertarians believe that, many don't. We'll debate that when we return. Welcome back. We're at the Students for Liberty Conference at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And this segment, I want to talk about war. Except I don't really, because I don't like talking about what I'm not knowledgeable about. And I spent my entire career talking about free markets and consumerism and psychology and medicine. And defense, I left to those other people. And I work at Fox with a bunch of very smart people who are convinced that we need to be in all those countries. And we need to spend, as we are, 1/5 of our budget on defense. They say we should spend more. So I'll let David Bose start with that, because most libertarians are skeptical about that.
That's right, John. I think for centuries, libertarians, classical liberals, whatever term they went by at the time, have been concerned, horrified by the impact of war on society. For centuries, war was totally devastating. It killed lots of people, it destroyed societies, it destroyed families and businesses, it wrecked the economy, it wrecked the treasury, cost the taxpayers money for years and years to come. Right now, the United States is involved in a couple of wars that are not as devastating as that. The war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Pretty devastating in Iraq and Afghanistan, but it's kind of easier here in the United States for us to ignore it because it's not, for a rich country, for a country as big as we are, not as much of an impact as wars used to have. But the same things are still there. We have spent something like $1 trillion on these two wars. Has it been worth it? Has it been worth a few thousand American lives and a lot more lives of people in Iraq and Afghanistan? And I think it hasn't. I think it's time to get out of these wars, bring the troops home, and one of the things it's time to do is for the United States to reduce its military footprint, its intervention around the world, because part of what that's doing, John said there are people all over the world who want to kill us. One of the reasons they want to kill us is we occupy their countries. We send American troops. We send American troops into their countries, and that makes people mad. There's a scholar at the University of Chicago who has pretty well demonstrated the most significant generator of terrorism is a country being occupied by a foreign power. We ought to ratchet back from that.
So I invite you to the microphone to comment about this. And while you come, let me ask you, David, Saddam Hussein supported terrorism. Plenty of people with whom I work say we needed to go in there, establish a beachhead of freedom, a freedom society in the middle of the Middle East. And it seems to have been kind of successful. The surge, which was vilified by the left, seems to have brought peace to Iraq. Maybe it's the role model for Egypt. Justified.
If it's brought peace to Iraq, then why aren't our troops home? Apparently we haven't brought peace to Iraq, which is why we're still there. And even if it had, you still have to ask, was it worth $500 billion?
Yes. Next.
Hi, my name is Alex McHugh. I'm with the American University here in D.C. During the Bush era, we saw a lot of support for the anti-war movement. It was very vocal, it was very visible. Where do you think that support has gone? Why has it left us, and where is it?
Boy, that is a really good question. Where is the anti-war movement?
It was probably mostly an anti-Bush movement, and now he's gone. But go ahead.
I work at the Cato Institute in downtown Washington. For 8 years, there was never a day that there wasn't an anti-war protest being advertised on the light pole in front of our building. Not by us, but just by, anti-war activists who would put these posters up. January 20th, 2009, those posters disappeared and they haven't come back. And John's right. The obvious, easy suggestion is these people weren't anti-war. They were only anti-Bush, and they're not anti-Obama. Another answer, I guess, is Obama said he would end the wars. And so they kind of retired. And it's taken them a while to figure out the wars aren't over. It's taken a long time for them to figure it out.
John Russell from the University of Nevada, Reno. True or false? Slaughtering innocent people is never justified.
I would say false. I think we had to kill innocent people to end World War II.
Slaughter is a charged term, and so slaughtering...
How about murder?
Well, murder actually means the unjustified killing. That's its definition. Right. So unjustified killing is never justified as a tautology. I agree with that.
But our bombs killed children. It's not justified to kill children.
That's right. If someone attacks you and you have to respond, but it's terrible to kill innocent people. In the American Revolution, innocent people were killed. Was it justified? Well, I think it probably was, to get the occupying British power out of the United States and allow us to be a free and independent country. But it's not something to be taken lightly. It is not something to be undertaken lightly. We should have a very good reason, and self-defense or national independence are basically the only reasons.
Hi, I'm Corey Moore from Kent State University. Back in the 1960s, obviously, we had a draft in this country, and that was the reason the anti-war movement was so big during the time. What are your thoughts on military recruiting on campuses, high school campuses, college campuses? Do you think that it's something the government should be doing?
The military is a legitimate function of government. It is essential to have a military to defend our country, and therefore it is absolutely appropriate for them to recruit everywhere they can. And I will say, one thing I don't think we want is a military that has no representation from our college-educated and our Ivy League-educated. So I'm happy to see the military recruit. But the question you started with, I think, is significant. There was a very powerful anti-war movement when there was a military draft. And clearly, one of the reasons we don't have a powerful anti-war movement today is that we're not drafting people and threatening to send them off unwillingly to war. I don't want a draft, but I understand we'd have a stronger anti-war movement if we did have one.
Thank you. Later in the show, we'll talk about another war, the war on drugs. But when we come back, we'll talk about the budget and how they're spending us into the tank. We're back at the Students for Liberty Conference in Washington, D.C. And now we want to talk about the budget. Government has to spend some money. How much? David Bose says this is our biggest problem.
I look out at young people here, and I think what my generation and the generation older than me is leaving for you. In 1980, the national debt of the United States was $1 trillion. That was a lot of money. But in just 30 years, it's gone from $1 trillion to $14 trillion. And you know, you might say if you have to win World War II or solve the Great Depression, maybe you need to run up a debt. We haven't had a World War II or a Great Depression in the past 30 years. We've had a pretty prosperous period, and yet we've run up $13 trillion in debt. Every president does it. Every Congress does it. They spend on all sorts of things. They spend on the military. They spend on farm subsidies. And the big thing they spend on is what they call entitlement programs. And they call them entitlement programs because they want everybody to think you're entitled, and therefore they can't do anything about it. But the fact is, everything in the federal budget was voted in there by Congress, and your generation is going to pay for that through taxes that will destroy the economy or inflation that you will have to pay for.
All right, you're clapping, but you want to throw the old people out on the street? You know, that's what entitlements are. Yes, ma'am.
Karina Zanat from the American University in Washington, D.C. A lot of my professors seems to think that even when politicians spend money in seemingly wasteful ways, we should be okay with it because every dollar spent is $1 that goes towards income for an American citizen. What are your thoughts on that idea?
What your professors fail to see and the politicians fail to see is that every dollar they spend is a dollar that is taken from somebody else. And it's the... It reminds me of this book your group puts out. What your professors won't tell you, it's the selected works of Bastiat, and one of his stories was the broken window theory, that somebody breaks a window and our politicians, Harry Reid, would say, wow, that creates 2 jobs, the janitor to clean it up and job for a glassmaker to replace the window. But what he doesn't see is the money to pay the glassmaker and the janitor were taken from somebody who might have bought a shirt or a pizza or gone to the movies, and that takes away jobs. And your professors apparently don't get that.
And it's not just a wash, because it's not just that, well, John doesn't have the dollar, now I have it. It is that the private sector will spend and invest the money more effectively, more efficiently. You will get more jobs and more wealth creation when money is spent by people in the marketplace than when it is spent by politicians.
Brian Green from the University of Chicago. My question is, what do you each think both of the political feasibility and ultimately the effectiveness of ratifying a balanced budget amendment to get federal spending under control?
Well, politically it's a real challenge. Economically it would be a good idea. Government should not be able to spend more than it takes in. Some economists would make the case that, well, in some years you should run a deficit, in some years you've run the surplus. Well, we've been running that experiment now for 30 years. They never run the surplus. So now that we know that they will only run deficits, we should stop them from doing it.
Hi, Meg Patrick, George Mason University in Fairfax. According to the Austrian business cycle theory, the bust
Let me interrupt you here. I mean, the Austrian business cycle theory. How often... I don't get to hear that very often, so yes, go ahead.
Couldn't you call it something like the happy business cycle theory? It would sound more compelling.
So according to the Austrian business cycle theory, or the happy business cycle theory, the bust is a necessary flip side to a boom. So do you think the injection of fiscal stimulus into the economy disrupts the signals necessary to fix the current problems?
You sure does. I mean, the signals necessary are failure. And if you're not allowed to fail, you don't get the market signals to behave in a prudent fashion. And they didn't, and they loaned like crazy, and they're doing it again.
You know, if you get drunk, you have a hangover. I'm sure there are some of you who have tried the theory, just keep drinking. But you can't keep drinking forever, and you can't keep the bubble going forever.
And sadly, when politicians get drunk, other people get hangovers. And when we return, we will talk about Republicans and Democrats versus Libertarians. Is there really a difference between Democrats and Republicans? Welcome back. We're at a conference of college students of a group called Students for Liberty. And David Bose of the Cato Institute says something strange. He says Republicans, Democrats, there's not that much difference. But what are you talking about? The whole political fight, I'm told, is about Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, they fight a lot. They absolutely do call each other names. But, you know, when you actually look at what they're doing, the Republicans are arguing we should cut like $60 billion out of the budget. That sounds like an incredible amount of money. But it's out of a budget that's almost $4 trillion, so it's really a tiny amount. The budget keeps going up under every president, Republican and Democrat. Bush got us into 2 wars. Obama said he would get us out, but he hasn't. Republicans and Democrats both listen more to special interests than they do to the taxpayers. Sometimes it's different special interests. The Republicans particularly like the family values groups and the farm subsidies, and the Democrats particularly like the unions and the organized women's groups and so on. But Wall Street is playing both parties. They both listen to special interests. They both believe in magic. They both think they can just write a law and suddenly we'll have strong families or an end to racism or everybody will get a good education. It's just magic. We'll just write a law. I like to talk about the people who think they can run your life better than you can. And one group of them are the Hillarys. And they think that you don't even know how to wipe your nose. They think you don't know how to burp a baby. And so they want to have a government program to tell you how to do everything like that. And then you have the Huckabees, and they think God could run your life better than you could. And since God doesn't actually appear on television, Huckabee will speak for him. And they think that you don't know what to drink, and you can't be trusted to decide what to smoke, and you can't be trusted to decide who to marry. And then over on the Hillary side, they don't think you can be trusted what to eat. So both of them are saying, I know how to run your life better than you do. And I think libertarians are the only people saying, you can run your own life better than politicians in Washington can.
Come to the microphone if you have thoughts on that.
Hi, my name is Dennis Craig. I am on the executive board of Students for Liberty. I'm also a student here at George Washington University. With the rise of the Tea Party in recent years, do you feel that that's harming the message of liberty if we continue to be associated with conservatives, or do you feel like libertarianism ought to be a philosophy that stands by itself on its own 2 feet?
Over the years, conservatives have resisted the demands for equal rights and equal dignity that came from black people and from women and from gay people, and libertarians should be on the right side of all of those issues, and that is a big difference. The problem with the Tea Party is focused on fiscal issues, and as long as they stick to fiscal issues, I don't think we should be criticizing them. They're not conservatives, they're not libertarians. They're fiscal responsible people, and that is a fine thing to do.
Next.
I'm Nicole. I'm from George Washington University, and my question is similar to actually my colleague asked earlier from George Washington as well. Should we be mixing the liberty movement with the Tea Party?
Let's end with that question from this segment. It's a good one because the Tea Party movement is wonderful if all the debate is about government spending. But more people in the Tea Party love the war on drugs and oppose gay marriage and hold a lot of ideas we libertarians abhor. So when we come back, let's talk about that, the war on drugs, when we return. We're back in Washington, D.C. at a conference of Students for Liberty. This topic, the war on drugs. Now, I get why people want a war on drugs. Drugs hurt a lot of people, and I had to work my brain around this to get to the point where I say, once you're 18 or 21, however you want to define it, you ought to be able to put anything in your body that you see fit. If you hurt yourself, that's your problem. What's the goal here? The goal is to protect us from ourselves. But how well is that working? Are the drugs harder to get at your campus than, say, alcohol? Are they? Easier. So making it illegal doesn't make it go away. Maybe a certain percentage of people will use or abuse intoxicants regardless of what the law is. My instinct as a parent is to say, I want a law, protect my kids, but it's not working. As you say, they can get it more easily than they can get alcohol. And it's harder to see the unintended consequences of these well-intended laws. But we ought to see them now, because now they're in our face. There's the crime. Almost all the drug crime isn't caused by people using these drugs and running out and committing crimes. They're caused because the law makes the drug illegal. Nicotine, our government says, is as addictive as heroin. Yet no one's knocking over 7-Elevens to get Marlboros. It's the law that causes the crime, because the sellers can't rely on the police to protect their private property, so they arm themselves and form gangs. And the buyers steal to pay the higher prices. If the purpose of the law is to protect us from ourselves, why is tobacco and liquor okay and cocaine not? Yes.
Hi, my name is Kelly Jemison, and I'm a senior at James Madison University in Virginia. In recent years, it's become a lot more evident the failures of the drug war. What do you think are some of the biggest factors that have increased public awareness, and do you think we could see legalization of drugs as a viable solution in our lifetimes?
Well, in our lifetimes, particularly for you, that's a long time. So I got to tell you, one thing that strikes me here is our last 3 presidents have all admitted that in their youth they used drugs. And presumably, they don't think it would have been good for them if they had been arrested and incarcerated. And I'm guessing that they don't think it would be good for the country if they had been arrested and incarcerated before they started their political careers. So I just do not understand the psychology of knowing that what you did in your youth, that your life would have been ruined if you had been arrested for doing. How can you arrest 1 million people a year for doing what you did?
Hi, Leah Palagashvili, George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Public opinion is really important. How many more failures do we need to see in the drug war, or what do you think needs to happen to help change the public opinion on the war on drugs?
People have lives. They don't spend their time studying public policy issues. Drugs are bad, drugs are scary, and therefore they want a war on drugs. Politicians are paid to spend their time studying the evidence, and they're not doing a very good job of it. I thought when the 60s generation got into positions of power, that would change the drug war. Government programs and the fear of the other are both so powerful, so difficult to overcome, that I don't have a prediction.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Dana Modulewski from Harvard University. I'm one of Students for Liberty's campus coordinators. A lot of people talk about how can we improve the life prospects of inner city minorities. Do you believe that one of the best ways we can improve their lives is to end drug prohibition?
Absolutely.
Yes. The most prosperous people in the community are drug dealers, people who are inherently in violation of the law, because that's the situation right now. It destroys respect for the law, respect for teachers and preachers and parents, because they all appear to be less successful than the flashy drug dealers. So it absolutely is devastating effects on inner city communities.
And what does it say to the kid who lives in that community? Where are the role models? The people with the money are the criminals, the people with the best cars and the best clothes. And why work for minimum wage at McDonald's when your little brother can make more as a lookout for the drug dealer? It just sends a terrible, distorting message to the poorest communities, but those poorest communities are also the ones most in love with big government and big government protection.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alexander Falkenstein. I'm from Arizona State University, and my question is, why hasn't there been more education on the benefits of decriminalization in foreign countries like Portugal?
Well, those of us who know about it have tried to educate. The Portugal story was not known, but is getting better known. It's been in important magazines, Newsweek, The Economist. It's been on television.
Let's just tell the story, which is that they decriminalized totally, and crime has gone down and drug use has gone down.
In fact, the U.S. drug czar went over there recently to try to get some evidence to refute this study, but if he got it, I haven't heard the refutation.
Thank you.
We're out of time for this subject. When we return, I want to ask you, what's it like on your campus? Are socialist and liberal professors cramming their ideas down your throat? What's it like to be for liberty on campus these days? When we return. very much. We're back for our last segment with the Students for Liberty at their conference in Washington. I want to ask you, what's it like to be a libertarian on a college campus these days? When I was in college, if I said, you know, I don't think the war on poverty is working very well, I don't think welfare has really helped poor people, they would have beaten me up. So what's it like now? Yes.
Hi, my name is Allison McCarty, and I go to Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. And this fall...
Lucky you.
I know. Somebody's got to do it. But this fall, in honor of Constitution Week, college libertarians put up a free speech wall at Pepperdine University, and we had a ginormous paper up on the wall where people could write anything that they wanted. And of course, some of the things were deep, some of them were silly, and some of them were downright offensive. But it was a really organic experiment in free speech where people, if something was said that was inaccurate or offensive, people would circle it, draw lines, and refute it. But unfortunately, at the end of the week, one of the students at Pepperdine took upon himself to tear down this wall, and he called it cowardly. It was something that said him, and he shoved it into the trash can. So I was wondering what your thoughts were about what this means and how we can address university settings that are very difficult and hostile to the message of liberty.
It's very tough. I've had, when I was speaking on campuses, people put up posters, capitalism is good, and students tore them down. And I think they are sincere in that they really view free markets as unfair to the poor. They're just ignorant, and we have to educate them.
My name is Saeed Hossein. I'm from Columbia University. One of the major things that students usually find attractive in colleges is diversity, and how there's this diversity of groups of different people coming together and being intellectual and learning. But the sad truth is, especially at a school like mine and many other schools, is that there might be diversity, but there's something lacking in diversity of thought, and that's something that really needs to come out, and we really need to have everyone support different viewpoints and have...
Are you respected as a libertarian?
A little bit, by some, scoffed at by others, yelled at by socialists.
Some of your classmates, when they start paying taxes, will remember some of the things you said.
Oh yeah, oh yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Zach Winston. I'm a student at Penn State. Through all my econ classes, free trade is generally emphasized as a good thing, as it is with many economists, but immigration is often ignored. Also, we have a social security problem in this country. Well, if we let in more immigrants, that could help raise taxes and other things, as immigrants tend to be of working age. I was just wondering your thoughts on this issue.
Well, I think letting in immigrants to improve the Social Security system is kind of like a Ponzi scheme. Eventually, they'll expect to get theirs, and so you'll just be stretching out the problem. Immigration is tougher, and there are more challenges. Letting goods cross borders is just mathematically, obviously better than trying to block them. With people can bring in diseases, people can bring in box cutters and bombs. People worry about things like that. A lot of the concerns about immigration may be racially motivated. Some are motivated by dumb economic ideas like they will take our jobs, which is just not understanding that the economy is a positive-sum game. But some are motivated by real concerns like some immigrants might be terrorists. Nevertheless, this country is built on immigrants. My family was here before 1776, so I guess I could say, hey, we were here first, you people stay out. But I will note that a lot of the anti-immigrant people in America, Pat Buchanan, his family wasn't here before 1776. Tom Tancredo, his family wasn't here before 1776. Michelle Malkin, her family wasn't here before 1776. So my family could have kept all of them out. But it's probably a better country because we did let in the Irish, the Italians, the Filipinos, and lots of other people.
Thank you.
We're just about out of time, and I want to leave room for one more point because David Bose said something recently that really turned my brain around about liberty, and that I complain a lot. I'm on TV saying they're taking our freedom, and Thomas Jefferson did say it's the natural progress of things for government to gain and liberty to yield. And that's what's been happening. Government is growing to the point that it's stealing your future. But there is good news that we tend to forget. When I was your age, most women could not get a credit card or start a business without their husband's permission. So a lot has changed to make us more free, and why don't you close us out with that?
Libertarians tend to say we're losing our liberties, we're getting less free all the time. We think The Road to Serfdom is a book about the world. And at the Cato Institute, we have a standard description of ourselves, and one of the things that it always said was, since the American Revolution, civil and economic liberties have eroded. And one day, Clarence Thomas came to speak at the Cato Institute, and he looked at that and he said, it doesn't really seem that way to black people. And we thought about it, and we realized he was right. So we changed that line. We talk about the threats to freedom, we talk about the growth of government, but we remember that it hasn't been all downhill since the American Revolution. I look out at you folks and I think, when I was your age, I was worried about being drafted and sent off to Vietnam. You're not worrying about that. That is a huge increase in freedom. When I was your age, there were 3 television networks. Now there are way too many. And that's because of loosening up the market. There used to be strict restrictions on price and entry in airlines and trucking and telecommunications and finance, and we lifted a lot of those in a wave of deregulation. Sometimes I ask libertarians, when is this year that you think we were freer than we are now? I had one libertarian write something where she said 1850. We had slavery then. 4 million Americans held in chains. How is that freer? Then he said, well, maybe 1880. Okay, that's a little better, but we had Jim Crow, and we had an awful lot of restrictions on the rights of women. Gay people certainly were completely unable to live their own lives back then. So I think in a lot of ways, we are freer today in modern America than we have ever been, despite all the restrictions on liberty that we ought to talk about. We need to keep that in mind. We are not just fighting a losing battle. And along with communism, we have defeated apartheid and Nazism and fascism, and we're getting rid of military dictatorships, and we may even bring down the autocrats in the Arab world. So there has been a lot of progress. But that progress didn't happen because of historical inevitability. Some of it's technology, some of it's economic change, and a lot of it is because people changed their minds about the way the government should treat people, and they got out and did something about it. And that's why it's so important that you are here, because it is up to us to make the further changes in the direction of freedom that we need.
Thank you. And that's our show tonight. Thank you, Students for Liberty.